Renato Moicano vs Alexander Hernandez is this Saturday, and man, is it an interesting fight and such a hard fight to predict. There's so many ways this fight could go. We could see the Renato Moicano that fought Jeremy Stephens appear here, looking to circle around the outside of the octagon, really walk Alexander Hernandez into his shots. As we know, Alexander Hernandez usually starts very aggressive, he's very fast and he's very explosive. He sprinted out the gate at Beneil Dariush to finish him in the first round, but we could also see a much more patient Hernandez, like we saw against Trinaldo and Thiago Moises, both who were training partners of Renato Moicano. We could see a more aggressive Moicano, who looks to take the centre of the octagon, like he did against Rafael Fiziev and Cub Swanson. And we could actually even see a real levels fight here, where Renato Moicano out-grapples Hernandez, similar to what he did to Jai Herbert. Or we could see Moicano get the better of the striking exchanges and Hernandez initiate the clinch. Hernandez is a very underrated grappler. We haven't seen it much, but he did out-grapple Oliver Aubin Mercier, who's a very strong and big 155er. One thing for certain, no matter which way Moicano approaches this fight, that early explosion from Hernandez is going to be a problem. As you can see here, Moicano can be a bit of a slow starter. He can be a bit predictable as he starts to get his rhythm, and he has been stunned a lot early. Korean Zombie finished him early, and Calvin Kattar rocked him very early in their fight as well. A lot of people think Moicano is going to approach this fight similar to how he approached the Jai Herbert fight, which was a heavy grappling approach. But Hernandez is really going to be a lot harder to take down than Jai Herbert. Moicano is 32 years old. He has 8 submission victories. He's 5'11", and he has a 72-inch reach. Alexander Hernandez is still on the right side of 30. He's 29 years old. He has 6 knockouts. He has the same reach, but he's 5'8". One thing to consider is Moicano is 5'11", and he stands very tall when he fights. So the same reach isn't exactly accurate. If you're talking about head strikes, Hernandez is going to be reaching up to try and land on Moicano, and I don't think he's going to want to keep this fight at Moicano's range. He's going to want to get on the inside, have Moicano stuck against the fence. That's where Hernandez does his best work. Renato Moicano really showed some great improvements in the striking against Rafael Fiziev. His striking has been getting good for a while now. He was really having some success with his 1-2 against Fiziev, one of the most dangerous strikers in the lightweight division. There was this really nice moment in the Fiziev fight where Moicano just glanced Fiziev's jaw with his jab. Fiziev looked to counter with the lead body kick. Moicano used both arms to block it. Fiziev throws the right hand and Moicano actually parries it and lands a right hand of his own. Fiziev blocks and moves away from Moicano's right. So Moicano loads up on the right hand, throws it wide as Fiziev is moving away. Fiziev attempts the same body kick and gets cracked with Moicano's best strike of the fight. Now there's been a lot of comparisons between Moicano and Cerrone, both long fighters, heavy kickers. But I'm not the biggest fan of this comparison because, one, I think Moicano uses footwork a lot more than Cerrone, and secondly, Cerrone really beat up Hernandez in the clinch with knees, with his clinch game. And Moicano really doesn't have much of a clinch game, or we haven't seen one. He was actually attempting to clinch with Fiziev when he got finished. You can see Fiziev throws the lead body hook. Moicano does block it and starts to reach for the clinch. He gets his right arm behind the neck of Fiziev when Fiziev lands his own right over the top. And this definitely stuns Moicano because he completely lets go. Fiziev loads up on the lead hook, and Moicano's completely off balance at this point, and that's the end of the fight. Now Moicano did do a great job of recovering. He actually locked up the wrist instantly, got wrist control, but the fight was called. A lot of people think Moicano has a durability issue. I don't think his chin's the best, but I do think he got finished, with strikes that would have finished most fighters. That early explosion is going to be a problem for him from Hernandez, and I do think 2 of the major flaws of Moicano are still there. In his last fight against Jai Herbert, which was pretty much a domination, there was this one exchange where Moicano is hand fighting with Jai Herbert, and he leaves his right arm really low again, just like against Fiziev, and he goes to clinch with his left, which allows Jai Herbert to land cleanly. Just 40 seconds later, Moicano throws that jab again, and he can be a bit predictable with this jab. Jai Herbert slips it and lands a beautiful lead hook. When we look at Hernandez's most famous fight against Donald Cerrone, we see once again he started strong, came out fast, landed a nice lead uppercut. A strike that Moicano is going to have to be careful of. A very tall fighter who leaves his arms out there, has that long reach, and doesn't move his head much. Hernandez looks to throw a body kick, and Cerrone catches this, turns it into a takedown, and Hernandez does a great job of getting back up. It was difficult, but he never accepted the position, and Cerrone gave up on the takedowns for the rest of the fight. I do believe Moicano still needs to shoot early, even if he can't get the takedown, if he can't secure the takedown. There has to be a takedown threat, because Hernandez is so much more explosive than Moicano. Later in the fight, we see Cerrone begin to clinch up with Hernandez to try and deal with the pressure and explosiveness, and this is where he seems to really find a liking for the knees. He starts throwing them early to the body and to the head, and then he starts countering with them every time Hernandez looks to explode in. Again, he clinches with Hernandez, knees him, and at this point Hernandez is just sapping his energy. He now has to step back because of the knee to the body, and this is where Hernandez really struggles. He does not fight well going backwards, and this could have improved since, but I do think it's always going to be a problem for Hernandez and his style of fighting. If we look at the record, you can see Hernandez made his UFC debut against Beneil Dariush in 2018 and won by first round knockout. He had a decision win of Oliver Aubin Mercier in a very heavy clinch and grappling fight. He lost to Donald Cerrone by round 2 knockout. He beat Francisco Trinaldo, but really not a lot happened in that fight. He lost to Drew Dober. I did always believe that was a bad matchup for him. People are hating on Hernandez's last 2 wins, saying that they're not UFC caliber and everything. But I think a lot of that is just to do with the fact that people don't like Hernandez because he used to talk a lot of trash. Because Mike Breeden's a really good fighter, and he stepped in on short notice, but he was doing everything right. He was working the leg of Hernandez, and he was trying to back him up by stepping in with that 1-2, and then Hernandez just caught him, and he couldn't recover. Hernandez, and it is true that they're not really comparable to Renato Moicano, but I think we did see some great combinations from Hernandez. I think we're seeing him start to come into his own. After the loss to Cerrone, he was way too hesitant, whereas we were used to seeing him so aggressive. And I believe in these 2 fights, and even the Thiago Moises fight, he started to show that gap where he can be aggressive, he can use his speed and his power, but he can stay calm, not get clipped, not be predictable. Now we look at Renato Moicano's record. He made his debut in December 2014, got a second round submission. He has 2 split decisions with Zubira and Jeremy, both very tough fighters. He lost to Brian Ortega in a fight he was doing really well in. Calvin Kattar, that was a great win, especially when we see Calvin Kattar now. He dropped Cub Swanson with a jab and finished him by rear naked choke. He did lose to Jose Aldo and Chang Sung Jung back to back, but that's very high level competition. He ran through Damir Hazardvik, lost to Rafael Fiziev. You can make the argument that most lightweights would lose to Rafael Fiziev right now, and then he dominated Jai Herbert. So I really think Moicano's record is the more impressive of the 2. I think he's fought the better competition. I do believe from Hernandez's last 2 wins, we can see he's really starting to set up his strikes better. He's really developing his own leg kicking game. But one thing I did notice is Hernandez didn't check a single leg kick in either of those fights. It obviously didn't matter, and they didn't last long enough for it to matter. But if this fight goes late, that's going to be a real problem, that he can't check leg kicks. If we look at the odds, Hernandez is a plus 140 underdog, and he can be found at plus 150. Moicano is a minus 160 favourite. If you want to bet Hernandez to win by knockout or TKO, you can get him as high as plus 270. Moicano to win by TKO KO plus 600. Be Moicano's first TKO or knockout, which is why the odds are so high. A lot of people think it's either going to be Hernandez wins by knockout or Moicano wins by decision. But this is one of the reasons I think this fight is so hard to bet on, because Hernandez only really needs two huge moments in 2 rounds. You know, if he stuns Moicano twice but can't finish him, then he can steal a decision. As hard as I think this fight is to call, I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to go with Renato Moicano. I believe he has more ways to win this fight. I think he's going to need to be on his A game. I think his chin is going to get tested. I think it's going to be very difficult in the early rounds. And then after the halfway point, I think he's going to take over. And I am going to place a bet. I'm going to bet on Renato Moicano to win by decision. So that is my final prediction. Thank you for watching.